Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's The World This Week. We're with Anne Bagamurray of the International New York Times, Anne-Elisabeth Moutet of the Sunday Telegraph, Antonio Rodriguez of the French news agency AFP, and Aaron Zaleski of the Daily Beast. Spain this week sailing into uncharted waters with no one able to cobble together a coalition. The king sending voters back to the polls. Now, back in December, new parties sparked hope of a rejuvenation of that country's politics. The anti-austerity Podemos party, the liberal anti-corruption crusading Ciudadanos making their entry into parliament. The result, though, after nearly 6 months of negotiations, well, it's been gridlock. The traditional center-right and center-left parties still the largest. There you see how the breakdown has changed since the poll in December. But polls suggesting that the June 26th vote, Antonio Rodriguez, could produce the same outcome as we got in December.
Yes, we don't know exactly what we should expect in June. What happened in Spain was expected. It was expected since day one, since the election in December. We had 4 parties, and it was quite impossible to reach a majority at the parliament. The only way to find it was a coalition between the Conservative and the Socialist Party. And they didn't...
A grand coalition.
A grand coalition, like in Germany. And perhaps, maybe because in the last years, we said to the Spaniards that they had to have a German economic system. Now we talk about a German political system as well. So maybe they were fed up with these German solutions. And they
What does that say to you, that the Spanish are contemplating? I mean, come on, let's think about it. I mean, there's this old deep-seated hatred, isn't there, between left and right, held over from the days of the dictatorship, and now we're saying that maybe there should be a grand coalition.
There should be a grand coalition because the Socialist Party and the Conservative were in charge in the last 8 years, and they applied the same policy. The austerity policy started with the Socialist Zapatero in 2011. And then the Conservative came in, have been in charge for 4 years, and they applied the same kind of policy. So we have the Spaniards decided to try other options, and the result is that in Spain today, it's impossible to have a government.
And by the way, when we debated this topic on this very set earlier this week, our guests were saying that ordinary citizens are mad at everybody. They're mad at the traditional parties and they're mad at the new parties for not being able to negotiate a deal.
Yes, that's the sense I have too. I share this. And maybe we will find a solution after this election, because if the situation stays the same, Conservative and Socialist will have no choice but find the way to have an alliance. And it may be without Rajoy and without Sanchez, the leaders. Maybe they need to change the leaders to reach an agreement.
Is this part of, is this a foreshadowing of what's to become elsewhere in Europe? That, Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, that...
Like in France, you mean?
That politics are changing and that we have to forget these old left-right divides if we want to get things done.
It's nice, but when you want to forget organised parties with a history and their roots in the regions locally, with people who vote for MPs for a long time, then you fall back on you need the new people have got to be incredibly nimble, inventive, and have a clear notion of where they want to go, and that's very difficult. And the situation in France is very interesting. Is that we've got this supposedly popular movement that's going nowhere in the middle of Paris. We've got parties that are tired. We've got candidates one of them was the Prime Minister more than 20 years ago, we probably will go into some sort of gridlock if nobody is imaginative. I'm old enough to remember when Franco died, and I'm still saying that considering what Spain has been going through, the fact that it is going through this through democratic travails, however difficult, is a cause for optimism. It's very impressive considering that this is a country that is not so long ago away from a fascist dictatorship.
All right, Aaron Zaleski, you heard Anisette Moutet say that the glass is half full when it comes to Spain, even though they're going to have a snap election.
I don't know if I would say, again, to go back to what you were saying about foreshadowing, I don't know if it's necessarily foreshadowing.
You're the one with the fresh eye on European politics here. So tell us, how broken do Europe's politics seem when
to me, Spain is a microcosm for a general uncertainty in Europe right now on many fronts, not just politically. We have the threat of terrorism, immigration, the possible collapse of Schengen, the Brexit. All of this is happening at once. And with my fresh eyes, I see this sort of enacted on a smaller scale with the Spanish gridlock right now.
And Bagamari?
Well, to Elisabeth's point about how this is happening in a democratic context, how democratic a context can it be if the electorate really refuses to vote? And a lot of the coverage I've seen indicates that Spaniards are just not motivated to go to the polls. They don't think their vote is going to make any difference at all. Antonio, maybe you can back me up here.
Not just in Spain. In several European countries, you have this sense that you have the situation that traditional countries are facing very
But hang on, this is devastating because
devastating.
When the election happened last December, we were hailing the fact that here are these new parties that are coming in. It's rejuvenating the whole system. Even the leader of the socialists is very young.
The result of the situation in Spain today is not the result of the election in December. It's the result of corruption in the two traditional countries, especially in the conservative. 2 weeks ago, the industry minister had to step down because he was in the board of a company based in Jersey, and
he's found out in the Panama Papers.
He was found in the Panama Papers. Yeah. So you have a lot of scandals. The prime minister didn't manage at time.
So why don't people put their faith in these new untested parties?
And these new untested parties didn't reach the majority in the parliament. So that's the problem, because the Spanish system, the one after Franco died, is a system that gives an advantage to the traditional parties. So in the next election, we are seeing the Podemos and the Communist Party trying to go together this time to this election, and they could be the second party after the Conservative. And the Socialists, like in so many countries now in Europe, the Socialist parties are facing very strong troubles. We have seen in Austria, and the traditional as well. In Austria last Sunday, we have this guy from the far right who went lead the polls, and the traditional parties were out in the first round. So we are facing this kind of situation in Europe, and the austerity, the crisis, didn't help, that's for sure.
Aaron, the moderates squeezed out of the game, does that sound familiar to you?
Yeah, that's funny you should ask. Actually, yeah, in the U.S., that's what a lot of people are saying happened with the Republican Party, that there's no more the place for moderates don't exist anymore. It's sort of tilted in favor of people with these extreme ideas. Or we have someone like Donald Trump, which was initially a joke to a lot of people, who could at this point he could very well be the Republican nomination.
All right, Elisabeth was talking about France. Let's talk about it now. Protesters have been trying to redraw the political fault lines here. On Thursday, demonstrations across France, students and trade unions. It's the fourth time they've marched. Left-wingers, who, by the way, voted for President Hollande last time around, marching against his government's labor reform demonstrations included their share of clashes with riot police, and it's anyone's guess who this Sunday's May Day marches how many will come out for this Sunday's May Day marches. Police, Thursday night, by the way, clearing out Paris' Place de la République, where the Nuit Debout, up all night movement that Anne-Elisabeth was mentioning has been staging its nightly Indignados, Occupy Wall Street style sit-ins and happenings. Anne Bagameri, have you been to Nuit Debout?
I have not, no.
What
I
is
work for a living.
your thoughts on this?
Well, it's pretty clear where their model is. It is Occupy. The stories that I've seen, including the one in the Times by Adam Nossiter, made it pretty clear that that's the model for these folks, and especially the anti-authoritarian stance. Nobody's a leader. Nobody's going to tell anybody else what to do. There are organizers, but they'll never tell you that they're organizers. You do have to wonder at some point what they're going to get done concretely if nobody is actually organizing things. But what really strikes me about this is the same thing that strikes me about every time there is a chance for labor reform in this country. And it's not people with labor contracts to protect who are out in the street. It's the young people who can't get hired because of the labor contracts that are tying up the workforce. They're the ones out in the street saying, no, I don't want a first employment contract, the contrat premier emploi. I don't want 2 years of real work in a company so that I can prove myself and maybe get one of those great French labor contracts. I want what my parents have, which is the gold-plated, fireproof contrat à durée indéterminée, the CDI. That is the entry to everything here in France. You can't get an apartment without it. You can't borrow money without it. There are all kinds of reasons it's a very fine thing to have labor security here. But when there is stasis like this and the young people can't get in, to see the young people in the street saying, that's okay, I'm going to stand here and hold my breath until I turn blue, until you give me what I want, which is what my parents had, I find it absolutely, as the French would say, hallucinant.
All right. On Facebook, this reaction, these protesters have 1,000 ideas on how government should spend tax money, yet have 0 ideas on how to earn enough money to pay those taxes. I'm guessing, Anne-Elisabeth, that person is not under 30 who wrote that.
Probably not, no. Probably not. But yes, there's this terrifying refusal. But it's not just the young, because you go to any demonstration of train workers in France, of postal workers, of a number of people, and you will see that what they want is what was wonderful before, and the idea that the world changes.
And what's wonderful still. I mean, there hasn't been much change on the labor front.
No, why should they not do it? I mean, they're perfectly rational creatures, because every government, left and right, has yielded. And we're coming to a point where we really have a debt that is so huge that, something's got to give, in the immortal words of Fred Astaire, and it can't go on forever. And all what they're all saying is, if I'm the one who gives in now, I'm the one who's going to lose out completely. Because yes, if you do not have those permanent jobs in which you effectively cannot be fired, or it's very difficult to fire you, life is difficult. But I must say that the whole culture, and I would say that the media, were quite responsible, at least the French media, in saying this is horrible. The whole atmosphere is about complaining, and it's about whining, and it's about saying you have it horribly bad. There's a can-do attitude that used to exist in France and doesn't exist anymore, the système D, all sorts of things. And the idea that you can have a can-do attitude in this country does not exist, and it's even frowned upon. And it's very sad. It's more sad than the system. France is still a rich country. It still gives you unemployment benefits. It gives you things. I've been in places, whether Britain or America, where I've seen what being poor is like. This sort of shivering terror of anything new or different, or anything that you try on your own, is mining. It's destroying. It's soul destroying. It's very sad for them.
All right, another reaction. I'll read it to you, Antonio. At least you have an insanely good welfare payout system in France. What do you think of the image this is giving of France?
Well, that's why I wanted to say something about the US, because I'm not French, I'm from Spain, and I will defend the French now, because I was in Washington, D.C. 2 weeks ago, and by chance, I saw a demonstration on a Sunday afternoon in front of Congress, and we had 1,000, maybe 2,000 people, like the one we saw in Place de la République, saying that they didn't want money anymore in the campaign. And
no more campaign financing.
No more campaign financing. And I think we have a global way of demonstrating now. Occupy Wall Street, Indignados, Nuit Debout, those guys in the US with some of them Bernie Sanders supporters. And it's not just France. We have to make a difference between the demonstration in the afternoon and the young people in the Republic, the Nuit Debout. They won't change. They are asking for something new.
There is a difference between the two.
Yes, I think so.
All right. Politics 2.0. It's not everyone's cup of tea. Cue France's former president, who, by the way, is on the campaign trail to get his old job back.
We can no longer let brainwashed high schoolers occupy our schools in order to protest a law which doesn't even contain anything. We can no longer let these mindless people occupy the Place de la République and give us lessons on French democracy.
Mindless people occupying Place de la République. Aaron, your reaction to that?
I mean, it's coming from Nicolas Sarkozy. It's not entirely surprising.
And do you take Antonio's point that we should perhaps distinguish between those that want to keep the labor laws just the way they are and those that are trying to maybe redefine a bit French politics on Place de la République?
It's interesting because I haven't been to the Nuit Debout, but I attended one of the earlier protests at Place de la République, and I interviewed a few people. And the sense I got was it wasn't just the labor laws that people are trying to mobilize against. It's a general dissatisfaction with the government, especially some of the measures imposed following the terrorist attacks. People kept bringing up the state of emergency extension. So I think it's an amalgamation of things. I think the labor reform is part of it, but it's just this general malaise that they don't trust the government anymore. They don't feel like the government is going to guarantee their rights. It's not going to take care of them. And so I found that attitude was prevalent when I was chatting with people.
It's very much like May 68 in so many ways, because they have said, actually, on Place de la République, I have been there, and they have said things like, we're not even interested in the labor law, we're talking about more fundamental things. And they've got this wonderful system whereby everybody speaks 3 minutes, and they've got entries, they've got people interest. You've got extremists of all stripes trying to sort of use these people, and they don't quite realize that they're being used. But in the meantime, they want to rebuild the entire country, and they're rewriting the constitution. And it's very charming. I don't think it's going very far, but it's very charming. However, I remember exactly a year ago, a bit more than a year ago, the march after the killings at Charlie. And it started from Place de la République, and as far as I was concerned, there were so many people in the street, more than 2 million in Paris alone. You could not move, so we did not leave Place de la République. And there was this wonderful sort of national feeling of togetherness, including the cops. And, 2 cops had been killed in those attacks.
Sure.
And people kissed the cops, and it was something amazing. And they looked at the snipers on the roofs, and they said, thank you. And now you've got the, silly kids saying, police fascist. They have no clue what a real fascist police is like. 78 cops have been injured in those demonstrations. Not a single young person has been actually put in hospital. 1 cop is in a very bad state in hospital. There has been remarkable restraint, and they are very young, and I was like that, and I was as silly as that, but at the end of the day, it's froth.
All right. The idea that we heard from the former French president about the nothing in their brain theme, you wouldn't expect that line from the Belgian defense attorney for Paris attack suspect Salah Abdeslam, yet on the day that saw the sole survivor from the commando that killed 130 back in November, extradited back from Belgium. Here's what Sven Marie told French daily newspaper Libération, that he said that he's a little moron from Molenbeek, more a follower than a leader. He has the intelligence of an empty ashtray. He's the perfect example of the GTA generation who thinks he lives in a video game. Anne Bagameri. We were all surprised by this.
I think we were surprised to hear something quite that frank. I think that Maître Marie probably said things that a lot of people think, but
He still
don't
is a lawyer.
generalize.
Brilliant defense. It is brilliant defense. This is a great lawyer. If anything happens to me, he's my lawyer. How do you get him off the hook? That way. He's stupid. It's not his fault. He has nothing in his brain.
That's not going to work in a French court.
I don't think it's going
It
to work.
might
but
work in an
it's-
American court, but it's not going to work in a French court.
It's a fine attempt. He's a Belgian lawyer, isn't he? Or is he a French lawyer?
He's Belgian.
It's Belgian math.
Yeah.
Might work in a Belgian court.
I hear those things, and I just think of my former father-in-law who used to say, who defended oil companies in business courts, and when his 68 son used to tell him that he was a tool of the state, he'd say, look, everybody deserves a lawyer. But I think it takes a toll. And Sven Marie also said, I couldn't do this anymore. I was getting threats. I was getting people throwing bricks through my window. I was getting spat on the street. I think it's tough. They're human beings, and when they have to put on the armor and do their job and defend people who nobody else will defend, it really takes a toll. If this was his spasm of, thank God I don't have to do this anymore and I can finally
He's still
speak
his
my
lawyer,
mind.
by the way.
He's his lawyer in Belgium, but he's not. Is he going to represent him in France?
No.
No, so it's, he's part of the legal team, but he doesn't have the responsibility of getting him off the hook.
Aaron Zaleski?
I mean, it is a good defense strategy, like you were saying. I mean, this guy, he wasn't this, rampaging jihadist in the street. He was sort of this loser who kind of got swept up in this whole thing and didn't really know what he was doing and doesn't have a lot of information, and just that he got caught up in this kind of thing. Everyone that they've spoken to, his friends and associates, I mean, in the Belgian and the French press, everyone sort of echoes that sentiment. He never was speaking about jihad. He was just smoking hashish all day and pretty much doing nothing with his life. But it sort of brings a new portrait of a different kind of terrorist threat. Everyone is thinking of going after the hardcore extremists. And then we have, on the other hand, these disaffected young men who basically are losers. And I think in this case, this guy wanted to feel important. Apparently they were interviewing him about his knowledge of the Quran. He said, oh yeah, it's something I read about it on the internet. So he didn't even really have a knowledge of Islam. So he was not the typical profile. He didn't fit the typical profile. So then we have other young men like him who've sort of fallen through the cracks of the system. Doing something like this gives them an opportunity to feel important, feel like they matter. And yes, back to the whole, was the Grand Theft Auto generation. I'm the star of my own video game, in a way.
But they killed just as much.
Yeah, exactly.
Their bullets
They're
killed
no
just as
less
well.
dangerous.
All right. Elisabeth Boutet, Aaron Zaleski, Antonio Rodriguez, and Bagamari, stay with us. There's one more precinct to be heard from on this matter, and it's in Media Watch. Looking at the GTA generation is Emma James. Hello, Emma.
Hi there. Yes, it's interesting really because Salah Abdeslam, I think quite possibly, is becoming the most hated man in the world because apart from all those who obviously are deeply upset about what he did on November the 13th, and his lawyer, who described him, as you've been saying, as a jerk with the intellect of an empty ashtray. Even his fellow prisoners, it's emerged, don't like him either.
His new fellow prisoners
Exactly.
in France.
He arrived in France, Fleury-Mérogis, on Wednesday, and it's been reported in French media that he was greeted by some applause, but a lot of boos, whistling and insults. And this isn't because they disapprove of cold-blooded mass murder on the streets of Paris. It's because they disapproved of him actually chickening out of doing what he was supposed to on November the 13th. According to a source from inside the prison, those who were hurling the insults were actually known to be radicalised.
This is according to who?
This is according to Marianne reporting it for One and BFM television. They've spoken to different sources within the prison service who say that it is the radicalised prisoners who are very upset with Salah Abdeslam. And it's worth pointing out that he is being kept in isolation and is also being filmed 24 hours a day because they are, of course, concerned that should those prisoners get to mix with each other, not only could they give each other ideas, but there is a real danger that there could be some kind of a problem between them.
Antonio Rodriguez, your reaction to that?
It's true that there is a problem in the prisons here in France. It's the place where a lot of them radicalized, and I didn't know that what happened in Fleury-Mérogis, but I'm not surprised. I mean, it confirms what we knew about the prisons in France.
All right. Earlier we were talking about anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. and the almighty row inside the Labour Party over it.
Exactly, and it involves one of those almighty political figures in the United Kingdom. He is pretty divisive. You love him or you loathe him. Red Ken Livingstone, the former London mayor. There's a lot being written about him right now because what people are looking at is also obviously what is his future, but also the future for the Labour Party in general. Roy Greenslade, who writes for The Guardian, which traditionally is a left-leaning paper, so should be more sympathetic to him. He writes that the grotesque analogies that Livingstone's come out with have actually united the national press across all political spectrums. He asks, has Ken Livingstone lost the plot? Can he not see that what he said about Hitler and Zionism was utterly balmy? Does he not realise that his remarks were an historical nonsense? He goes on to say that the only people surprised by the backlash are Ken himself and a lunatic Labour fringe, he refers to them. He points out that the right-leaning paper is obviously very quick to shift focus onto the Labour Party as a whole and Jeremy Corbyn to say, what is he doing to actually stop the rot? Is there a problem with anti-Semitism within Labour? The Sun's headline was "Read and Buried." Not an original one, it's been used before. But Labour's allies aren't happy either. He points out that the Mirror said the charge of anti-Semitism is undermining Jeremy Corbyn's position.
He has been, though, suspended from the Labour Party.
Well, he has been suspended, not fired. There has been call for this MP who attacked him, we saw the footage earlier on, to be suspended as well, just because he accused Ken Livingstone of betraying the ideals of the Labour Party, and it's got already 2,000 signatures within Labour, which is worrisome. And Jeremy Corbyn said that he thought that all of this hoopla about anti-Semitism in Labour was really directed against his own leadership. And so I fear that Jezza himself has locked the plot, so to speak.
Emma James, across the Atlantic, you've also been looking at the latest from the U.S. election, where the front-runners are now a bit firmed up their positions, shall we say.
Absolutely. And interestingly, although these comments were made back on Tuesday by Donald Trump, the comments are about Hillary Clinton playing the woman card.
Oh, yeah, if she was a man, she would only get 5% of the vote.
Exactly. And obviously there's been quite a backlash to the idea that a woman politician is going to have an easier ride than a male one. Hillary Clinton's initial response was this: so if fighting for women is playing the woman card, will deal me in. What she has now done, her campaign team, has obviously had a bit of a think about how they can keep up the momentum of this idea, because the hashtags woman card and deal me in have been trending all week in the United States. And what they have done now is created a woman card. This hot pink card here is going to be sent out to anyone who donates to Hillary Clinton's campaign. The Washington Post has pointed out that it's an unusual case of life imitating parody. The official hot pink woman card is very popular with her followers, even among men. This tweet from a gentleman called Kevin Atkinson: "You're damn right I just donated to Hillary Clinton so I can get my official woman card," which I think is absolutely wonderful.
Perusing favours here. All right, many thanks for that, Emma James. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in The World This Week.